Burgundy, the most loved, hated, overcomplicated and overpriced wine region in the world. People go crazy for it, people lose money for it, and most of the time they can't even explain why. Some people spend their whole lives trying to understand Burgundy. So I won't pretend I'll explain all of it in 8 minutes. What I can do is to give you a clear, general introduction that makes sense. By the way, if we haven't met, I'm Anya Garibaldi, a professional sommelier, educator, and diploma WSET candidate. Basically, I drink wine for work, memorize absurd wine laws, and then make it simple for you. My job is to turn all the wine snobbery into something you can actually enjoy without needing a PhD in geography. All right, Burgundy. Here's the deal. Burgundy stretches from the north in Chablis down to the warm south in the Mâconnais. Each part is like its own little kingdom. Chablis is the most northern and the coldest. Forget battery California Chardonnay. This is very sharp, high acid, crispy Chardonnay. Think lemon, green apple, slice of oyster shell. The soils are Kimmeridgian, clay limestone seashells. That's why wine nerds keep saying it tastes like licking a rock. It does in its best way, but beware, Chablis suffers terribly from frost and hail, so one year is magic, the next year is a heartbreak. They literally light fires, also called smudge pots, in the vineyards to stop the pots freezing. Looks romantic on Instagram. There's even a video with fire burning, but it's just survival. And even here, you have hierarchy. Petit Chablis, grown on higher up on Portlandian soil, lighter and cheaper than regular Chablis, more depth. Then Premier Cru, with about 40 vineyards on perfect mid-slopes. And then the top, the single Grand Cru hillside with 7 named plots. Then comes Côte d'Or, in the beating heart of Burgundy. It's divided into two. Côte de Nuit in the north, famous for Pinot Noir, though you'll also find some Chardonnay. The reds are what it's known for. And Côte de Beaune in the south, famous for Chardonnay, but also producing excellent reds. The climate is a bit warmer than Chablis, still continental, but with the same frost and hail risks. The best vineyards are usually on mid-slopes between 200 and 400 meters, where you get good drainage, protection from cold winds, and are less exposed to spring frost than down in the valley floor. Even two vineyards right next to each other can have different classifications because of small differences in soil or slope exposure. That's how detailed Burgundy gets. Pinot Noir here can be pure elegance. Red fruit, violets, forest floor, silky tannins. Chardonnay ranges from lean and mineral to rich and nutty with new oak. Côte de Nuit has more limestone soils, perfect for Pinot Noir, while Côte de Beaune has more clay, perfect for Chardonnay. Now, one important thing to remember about Burgundy, not every year is a good year. The weather here can be unpredictable, and sometimes whole vintage can turn out lighter, less balanced, or just not worth cellaring. That's why I've made a free vintage checklist you can download. Keep it on your phone, and next time you're looking at a Burgundy label, you'll instantly know if that year was great, average, or one to avoid. Further south, you've got the Côte Chalonnaise and the Mâconnais. Warmer, sunnier, friendlier, grapes have better ripeness, so you get riper fruit, sometimes even tropical notes in Chardonnay. Chalonnaise can even make sparkling Cremant. Mâconnais is Chardonnay land, producing tons of wine, much of it approachable and affordable. Puy-le-Fusé is the star here, often confused by newbies with Puy-le-Fumé from the Loire. Don't make that mistake unless you enjoy watching sommeliers smirk. Now classification, the part that drives people mad. At the bottom, you've got regional wines labeled AOC Bourgogne. Grapes can come from anywhere in Burgundy, and this is the most common regional appellation. These wines can be good, sometimes a bit simple, sometimes surprisingly interesting, and usually they're the cheapest level in Burgundy. But here's the catch, even big names like Domaine Leroy, famous for their Grand Crus, also make regional Bourgogne, and those bottles sell for sky-high prices just because of the name. The next level is village wines, labeled after specific villages like Meursault, Pouligny-Morachet, or Gevrey-Chambertin. Grapes can be blended from different vineyards inside that village, and the label shows the producer name plus the village name. Then comes Premier Cru. But before that, let's clarify something important. How vineyards are named in Burgundy. Climat isn't weather, it's Burgundy's word for a vineyard. Each climat has a small named vineyard with its own unique soil and character, and it is officially classified in Burgundy's appellation system. Some climats produce village wines, others are Premier Cru, and the very best are Grand Cru. You'll also hear the term Ludi, a named piece of land within a village or a vineyard area. Unlike climats, Ludis are not officially classified in the appellation system, but producers often include them on the labels, especially for village-level wines, to show exactly where the grapes come from. Now, Premier Cru means the grapes come from a historically recognized vineyard, or climat, as we have just learned. Labels say the village name, Premier Cru, and the vineyard name. For example, Chambol-Musigny, Premier Cru, Le Charme. If it's a blend of several Premier Cru vineyards or climats within the same village, the specific vineyard name doesn't appear on the label. At the very top, there are the Grand Crus, the legendary vineyards like La Tâche, Romanée-Conti, Montrachet. Grand Cru wines in Burgundy don't include the village name on the label as per AOC regulation. Their reputation stands on the vineyard name alone. Grand Crus make up to 1% of production, but 90% of hype and 100% of price shock. Yields are tiny, sometimes only 35 hectoliters per hectare, which means maximum concentration and very rare bottles. Winemaking depends on the level. For whites, regional wines are usually fermented in stainless steel, sometimes with a touch of old oak. As you move up to Premier Cru and Grand Cru, you'll often see barrel fermentation, new oak, malolactic conversion, and batonnage to give that creaminess. Some producers also use hyperoxidation, letting the juice oxidize a bit early to avoid the dreaded premix or premature oxidation. This was a big scandal because many people bought bottles in the 1990s and 2000s that shows the color and flavors you'd only expect after 20 years of aging, but the wines were still young. For reds, Pinot Noir is often fermented with whole bunches, sometimes disturbed. Extraction is gentle, never heavy-handed. Aging is done in small oak barrels with a percentage of new oak depending on the producer. It could be as little as 10% or as much as 100% for Grand Cru. Again, it's all about style and money. The business side is just as complex. You have domains who grow grapes and make wine, negociants who buy grapes or unfinished wine and bottle under their own label, micro-negociants who hunt tiny allocation of famous vineyards, and cooperatives. In Chablis, the Chablisian cooperatives makes 1/4 of all production. In Côte d'Or, cooperatives matter less. The top wines are sold en primeur, which means you pay while the wine is still in barrel and hope you'll get the allocation. The reason prices are insane is simple. Tiny land, tiny yields, or tiny production. Burgundy represents around 4% of all the vineyards in France. Crazy demand, inheritance laws that split vineyards into microscopic parcels, and the magic reputation of Burgundy built over centuries. So, to sum it up, Burgundy is Pinot Noir and Chardonnay from north to south, but depending on the place, you get everything from razor-sharp Chablis to rich Montrachet, from delicate Chambol-Musigny to powerful Gevrey-Chambertin. The classifications go from regional to village to Premier Cru to Grand Cru, with prices climbing like a rocket the higher you go. The climate is continental, which means vintage variation is massive. One year's a miracle can be another year's disaster. And the business model guarantees scarcity, which guarantees high prices. That's why it pays to follow along. Subscribe so you don't miss when we break down which vintages are really worth chasing. Next time someone drops, "Oh, it's a Puligny Montrachet Premier Cru" at dinner, you can actually nod and know what it means. And if you want to start exploring Burgundy without selling a kidney, try Mâconnais Village or a good Chablis. Save the Grand Cru for the day you win the lottery.